It's about to bust out the shits. You see it. I don't know if you can see it, but it's like drippage. Pause. That sounded so sus. It's like right. It's like all right. You see, it goes like right. Busting. Okay, my bad. All right. Hold on. Let me just. It's tradition. No, it's not tradition, but it is tradition to kind of like have popcorn for every Mr. Nightmare video. But if I did that, I don't think I would be here right now. All right, let's go. Sup, dope.
Today, I'm going to share 3 progressively more bizarre missing person cases. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please tuck the like button into their bed and read them a bedtime story, and then when they ask you for a glass of water, say, no problem, go get them a cup of water, and then when you come back, dump it on their stupid face.
Oh my God.
Subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads.
Come on!
Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Dice roll! Dice roll! Shoo!
On the evening of June 28, 1997, an 83-year-old woman named Leila Howard turned up the radio in the living room.
Oh, God. My face was like, y'all know how I felt about old people. If you 60 and up, you clucking up. She looked 60, but she probably like 49, I don't know. You know, white people age different than black people. Just saying. So she probably like a nice, sweet old lady. But because you know, on this video, you probably clucking up.
Her small home in Texas, and then she took a seat next to her husband, Raymond, on the couch. This was a song that both of them loved, and in the past, Leila knew her husband would have swooped her up and begun dancing with her right away. But Raymond was now 88 years old, he was also recovering from brain surgery, and they both were planning to go to bed in the next few minutes because they had a big day the next day. They were going to go to the Pioneer Day Music Festival, which is an annual fiddling festival located about 15 miles away from where Leila and Raymond lived, in the town of Salado, Texas. Leila and Raymond attended this festival basically every year. And so even though Raymond right now was a bit fragile from his surgery and his advanced age, the couple had not even considered missing it. Leila's son, Hal, had tried to persuade Leila to let him, Hal, drive the couple to the music festival, but Leila said no because Leila and Raymond were both fiercely independent and wanted to be in control of their lives, which included driving to and from this festival.
That's not that
Also,
serious.
Leila had talked about maybe going someplace else after the festival ended with Raymond, kind of spontaneously just driving out and doing something. And so she really wanted to have her own car in case she did want to do that. And so after a few minutes, Leila and Raymond's favorite song came to an end, and the DJ hopped back on the radio and began talking about the weather and the traffic. And at that point, Raymond and Leila, they stood up from the couch, they took each other's hands, and they walked upstairs to go to bed. The next morning, so June 29th, Leila and Raymond...
I just want to let y'all know, this is adorable. 2 old-ass, cluck-ass people just in love. Oh, it's such a beautiful, cluck-ass sight.
walked out the front door of their house, and they walked down to their driveway where their Oldsmobile car was parked. Leila helped Raymond get into the passenger seat, and then Leila took her spot in the driver's seat. And then a few moments later, after they were all buckled in and situated, Leila fired up the car, backed out the driveway, and began driving. That evening, Leila's son, Hal, decided to swing by Leila and Raymond's house to check in on them and see how the festival went. And so at about 5 p.m., Hal got to their house, and right away when he pulled up, he he noticed that Leela and Raymond's car, the Oldsmobile, was not in the driveway. And so Hal thought that was pretty odd, because by now they should have been back from the festival.
Well, hell, who's to say that's I took so long to say something. Who's to say that those two clock asses didn't get away to a motel or something and got it on? Just saying.
Past, they would always get home by about 3 p.m. at the absolute latest because they didn't like staying out late, and so it just seemed odd that they were not back by now. But at the same time, Hal knew that Leela had been thinking about maybe going out and doing something spontaneous after the event was over, and so he thought, maybe his mom and Raymond were out driving around somewhere and they'd be back later. But just for good measure, Hal did park the car and he walked up to the front door of the house and he did knock, but when there was no answer, he thought, you know what, I'll just go home and come back in a few hours and check in on them at that point. And so, a few hours later, at 8 p.m., Hal drove...
Hey! Hey! What if... What if, yo... Oh my God! You ever... Hold on, it's not part of it. I'm crying. You ever experienced like somebody that's about to tell you a joke, but they laughing before they tell you the joke, and they laughing too long, and you just sitting there like, this better be funny for as long as you laughing. Yo, what if their son came back, knocking on the door, the car not there, right? And I don't know, what if they was there that whole time, but they just got finished like banging it out, right? Right? He didn't bust nuts, but he just busted like some air or some shit, right? Because he owed the club. And so they both tired, they both got their rocks off, right? So they just passed out. And so the son left, came back a few hours later, banging on the door loud as shit. They still sleep. And the granddad come up, cranky as hell, still tired from busting that air. Opens the door, see his son, was like, where was you at? Where's your car? What's going on? I haven't heard from you in 6 hours. Damn, son. I just want to bust some nuts. Hop off my dick. Get off my nuts. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then you see like the old lady in the back talking about something. Yeah, hop off my pussy. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh shit. That should be a scene in a movie. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God, that was funny. I don't know if y'all was laughing as much as I was, but shit was funny. Damn, son, hop off my nuts.
Back to Leela and Raymond's house, and when he got there, he saw their car was still not back yet. And so now Hal's starting to feel quite worried, and so he parked the car, he walked up to the front door, he did knock, there was no answer, and so he pulled out his set of keys, he opened up the door, and he walked inside. Now, as soon as he was in the house, nothing looked out of place. It actually looked very organized and clean like it normally was, but as he walked around looking for some sign of where Leela and Raymond were, all he could find was on one of the beds, there were all these neat stacks of clothes that were laid out as if somebody was getting ready to pack but didn't finish packing. And so it just seemed like something's off here, something's not right. This doesn't seem like they just went out and did something spontaneous. Something must have happened at the festival. That's why they're not back yet. And so kind of in a panic, Hal ran outside and he called the police. And after reporting Leela and Raymond missing, he actually began calling news stations and telling them, can you please put out my mom and Raymond's picture because they're older and they're missing, I need your help. And in fact, that night, those TV stations did begin putting out all these reports about how Leela and Raymond were missing and for people to be on the lookout for them and their car. At the same time, the police immediately launched an investigation, and they quickly discovered that Leela and Raymond had never even made it to the music festival.
Shit.
They never got there. And then when the police drove the route that Leela would have taken to get to the music festival, they didn't find any car accidents or anything unusual on the route that would indicate that they got into some trouble or something. You know, they checked their phone records and Leela and Raymond had called nobody. There was no action on their credit cards, and so they hadn't bought anything. And the police would send out all these missing person reports to police officers all over the state of Texas, and nobody reported seeing anything or hearing anything. That is, until 3 days later on July 2nd. On that night, a police officer in a little town in Arkansas, located 500 miles away from where Leela and Raymond lived, this police officer was driving down the road when he spotted an Oldsmobile that was driving with its lights off. And so the officer pulled the car over and he ran the license plate, and it came back as belonging to Leela and Raymond. But you got to remember that this police officer was in Arkansas, and so he had not received any updates about this missing couple. All those TV broadcasts and all the missing person alerts that were getting sent out all over the place, those were really only happening in the state of Texas. And so this officer has no clue that Leela and Raymond are missing. But he runs the plate, he sees it belongs to Leela and Raymond, and he goes up to the driver's side window, and he looks inside, and he sees Leela and Raymond. Leela's driving, Raymond's in the passenger seat, and they look like a really happy older couple. And the officer would say to Leela, hey, you're driving with your lights off. And Leela would say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. You know, we were driving in Texas and we got lost, and I just didn't notice.
How the fuck? See, now, something not making sense. You was in Texas. You never been to the music festival. Like, you were in Texas. How the hell did you end up 500 miles away? God damn. Nah, that's a setup. And you drive without your lights? Seemed like a setup to me.
Sorry. The officer believed her and felt like these were good people who just made an honest mistake, and so he just flicked her lights on and said, I'm going to give you a warning, no big deal, no ticket, but be careful with your lights. You got to make sure those are on at night. And Leela said, thank you very much. You know, of course, I'll be very careful with my lights. And then actually the officer gave Leela directions on how to get back to Texas from Arkansas. And then he got back in his cruiser, and then he watched as Leela and Raymond pulled onto the main road and then disappeared into the darkness. The police officer in Arkansas who pulled them over would eventually put it together who he had pulled over, and at that point, Arkansas would get in on the search for Leela and Raymond. But for the next 2 weeks, despite having both states aggressively searching for this couple, nobody could find them. That is until July 12th, so that's 10 days after Leela and Raymond got pulled over by that cop in Arkansas. On that day, these two young boys...
I wonder, it's just a theory. I'm getting confused about the names and the sexes. But like, what if like the one that's driving killed the one that's in the passenger seat? And the way the person that's in the passenger seat is like the way they're positioned makes it look like, you know, they're either asleep or, you know, relaxing or something. But I don't know. That's just a theory, though. Because we're like, you're 500 miles away from Texas. Like, what are you doing?
Were walking by a small stream in a town called Hot Springs, Arkansas, when they began to smell a terrible smell. They would end up telling their parents, who would come back to the stream, and they'd smell it too, and they would end up alerting the police, and the police would come out, and they would search that entire area, and they would find Leela and Raymond's Oldsmobile at the base of a 25-foot cliff, and inside the vehicle were Leela and Raymond, and they were both deceased. It looked very much like Leela and Raymond had driven off this cliff and they had landed down below, and that's what killed them. But when investigators went up to the top of that cliff, there were no skid marks on the cliff itself, which meant Leela, who was driving, never hit the brakes as she went over the cliff. Nobody knows why Leela and Raymond abruptly left their town and drove hundreds of miles into Arkansas instead of going to their favorite music festival, although their family members have speculated that it could be because Leela and Raymond had declining cognitive function, and so they basically didn't know what was going on, and that's why it happened. But the reason this story is in this video is because this story about Leela and Raymond is what inspired a very, very famous song from the late 1990s. It's called The Way by Fastball, and for copyright reasons, we can't play it for you, but I'll sing you a line and see if you can remember this song. Where were they going without ever knowing the way? Anyone?
Come on now! Come on, Mr. Barley! The reason I did it like this and not like this is because I had all kinds of seasonings on my finger. Come on now! Come on now! Damn! Come on with the vocals! Not you singing to your kids every night or every other night. Not you singing them a lullaby. Not you singing them a lullaby. I hope you have a good night. Sleep tight.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I don't know.
And see the road that they walk on is paved in gold. It's always summer, you'll never get cold. You'll never be hungry, you'll never be old and gray. Boom, there you go. If you know the song, now you know it's got a pretty intense backstory.
That's crazy.
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. After getting out of the military at the end of 2017, the transition from military life to civilian life was so overwhelming that it sent me spiraling into a deep depression. Luckily, before I did anything rash, I took my family and friends' advice and sought out a therapist. And my therapist quickly identified that a lot of my depression stemmed from things that I couldn't change. And so my therapist not only showed me this kind of truth to my life, but they also helped me reframe the way I think about those triggers. And eventually, their help allowed me to accept the past and just move on. And so this was a huge turning point for me because it showed me therapy actually works. Now, therapy is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but if you're struggling right now and you don't know what to do, consider giving therapy a try. And a great therapy platform to try, especially for folks who have never used therapy before, is BetterHelp. BetterHelp is a highly reviewed online therapy platform, which means you can get the help you need right from the comfort of your own home. Get matched with a BetterHelp therapist after filling out a brief survey online, and then it's up to you how you communicate with your therapist, whether that's through messaging or video or phone call or some combination. You can also switch your therapists at any time at no additional charge. Join over 4 million people who have used BetterHelp and start living a healthier and happier life. Visit betterhelp.com/Mr. Ballin or just click on Mr. Ballin during the sign-up process for a special discount on your first month of BetterHelp. Okay, back to the stories.
The box!
Late one afternoon in April of 2019, a middle-aged woman named Mary was cutting up some vegetables in her kitchen in northern Spain when she heard a knock on her front door. So she put her things down, she went to the door, opened it up, and standing there was her neck.
Wow. I'm so tired of people just opening up their front door just wide open without checking who's there first. I hate that shit.
Door neighbor who was all smiles, and she was holding this big box that was wrapped in wrapping paper and had a big bow on it, and then sitting on top of this big gift was a tray of deep fried rolls or croquettes. Mary's neighbor was a 61-year-old woman named Carmen Marino who was
I'm good. You said 61? I'm good. If you're 60 and up, you clucking up.
exceptional chef. and her specialty were making these croquettes. They were filled with different types of meat and other things, and
Different types of meat? What you talking about? You suck as shit! It's probably like 1% chicken or steak and 99% human. I'm not eating that shit. Hell no.
all the time, Carmen would come over and give them to Mary. And Mary loved these croquettes. And so as soon as she saw those, she was like, wow, amazing. And she invited Carmen inside. But Carmen didn't come inside. Instead, she took the croquettes and handed them to Mary. And Mary's like, okay, great, thank you. But Carmen was still standing right outside holding this box. And now Mary's looking at her thinking that Carmen looks kind of uneasy. And so Mary said, what's going on here? What's up with this box? Carmen was silent for a second and just kind of held this box out, at which point Mary realized, okay, so she's trying to give me this gift. And so Mary reached out and took this huge present, and she was like, thank you, Carmen. Like, what is this? What's going on? And Mary, when she looked at Carmen, she could tell Carmen's face was now bright red. She was very embarrassed about something, maybe whatever she was going to say. And so Mary just waited for Carmen to speak. And so eventually Carmen she would clear her voice, and then she would say, Mary, this is really embarrassing, but I need you to hold on to this box for a little bit. It contains my sex toys, and I'm having company over at my house, and I'm just worried that somehow they're going to find these things. Mary was so caught off guard by what Carmen was telling her.
Hey! I would feel like... Oh, shit. I got popcorn and shit on me. Adidas gang, what's up? Let's say this a box, right? Let's say this a box. She handed me the box without saying nothing, mind you. Such a shit. She's just gonna hold the box like this, and then she's just gonna wait for me to take it. So I take it, right? And she said it's her sex toy. I said, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. And then she says it's her sex toys. That's nasty. That's nasty. I would have dropped that shit so fast
that she just started laughing. But Carmen didn't join in on the laughter. She just kind of looked down like she was totally mortified. Mary stopped laughing because she felt bad. And then Carmen kind of elaborated on why she had this huge...
Giving somebody else your own used sex toys, that's nasty.
...box full of sex toys. She would tell Mary that, she bought them with the intent of using them with her boyfriend, but a couple of months ago, he had broken up with her. But Carmen had held on to these in the hopes that the boyfriend would eventually take her back and they would get back together again and get to use these toys. And so even the...
Stop the cat. Stop the cat. Your husband wasn't throwing it down. He got a small dick. Sometimes it's not what you got, it's how you rock the boat. And he wasn't rocking nothing. She didn't feel nothing. Well, how his friend say in the YouTube video, he got a pecker. He not touching her like that, like he cheating, like he not kissing her, he not throwing it down, like he not doing nothing. So she clucked him up, right? The salmon croquettes. You're eating her husband, right? That's the meat that's in the croquettes, right? And she got tired of just using those sex toys, so she gave them to you. Hell no.
This was a totally weird and kind of uncomfortable request. Mary kind of felt bad for Carmen. One, because she had to make this request of Mary, but also two, it was obvious that Carmen was pretty shaken up about, losing her boyfriend. And so Mary said, you know what? No problem, Carmen. I will look after your sex toys and I will enjoy your croquettes. And Carmen was so relieved and said, thank you so much. And then she turned and hustled back to her house. And then Mary shut the door and she brought the croquettes into the kitchen and she tried one and it was so good.
Ew.
And then she took the big box of sex toys and she went into the hallway. She opened up a closet and she put it on the top shelf and then shut the door. Over the next couple of days, Mary expected Carmen to come back over and reclaim her box of sex toys, but Carmen didn't. And when days turned into weeks and then turned into months, and still Carmen had not come over to get the sex toys, Mary was kind of annoyed, but she was just too embarrassed to go over to Carmen and be like, hey, why don't you come over and get your sex toys? And so Mary just decided she would leave it alone and not talk about it, and if ever Carmen wanted them back, she could have them, but if she never asked for them...
Nah, the most I would ever hold somebody's sex toys is probably like 2 hours. I'm not holding somebody else's used sex toys for months. After 2 hours, if you don't come and get your sex toys back, I'm coming over your house, banging on your shits, and I'm saying, yo, Carmen, I don't know why I said Carmen, get your nasty ass sex toys. It's been 2 hours too long. Also, hey, Carmen, that box is leaking some shit. I don't know. It has the consistency of glue, but it kind of look like lotion. I don't know. That's nasty.
Again, Mary didn't care. She would just eventually throw the box away, and that would be it. A few months later, on September 29th, 2019, so we're talking about 6 months or so from when the sex toys were first brought over to Mary's house. Well, on this day, Mary was kind of doing chores in her house when she began to smell a really bad smell coming from the hallway closet where the box of sex toys were. And so Mary opened up the closet, and for sure, she could tell the bad smell was coming from this closet. And so she started by smelling the shoes that were towards the bottom of the closet to see if maybe she had stepped in something gross, but they were all clean. And then eventually she reached the sex toy box. She pulled it down from the top shelf, and it had never been opened. You know, it's still wrapped, but she just smelled the box and she immediately recoiled because that had to be where the terrible smell was coming from. It was coming from this box. And so Mary was totally repulsed at the idea that these sex toys smell horrible, but she carried the box into the kitchen and set it down, and she thought, you know, is this a horrible betrayal of my friend's trust?
That's her husband.
If I open up this box and look at her sex toys?
That's her husband.
But Mary ultimately was like, you know what? Carmen has not come back for this thing. I'm opening this up because I need to know what's making this smell. So Mary went over and got a pair of scissors and she cut off the wrapping paper, and then she opened up the box.
That's her husband.
Inside was like this big thing that had been wrapped in tinfoil. So all you saw was tinfoil.
That's her.
And so Mary, she reached down and kind of began to peel back the tinfoil. It was kind of sticking to whatever was under it. But eventually, after she kind of yanked on it, she pulled the tinfoil off. And when she saw what was in there, she began screaming and ran outside and called the police. It would turn out Mary's neighbor, Carmen, who owned the box of sex toys, well, her boyfriend didn't just break up with her a couple of months before she brought the sex toys over. No, her boyfriend, who was a 67-year-old man named Jesus Baranda, he went missing around the time that supposedly Carmen and her boyfriend broke up. And so naturally, Jesus's family began looking for Jesus, and when they couldn't find him, they called the police. And eventually the police called Carmen and said, hey, you were dating Jesus around the time he went missing. We're going to need to come to your house and search it. And when Carmen heard that, she knew she had a big problem because Carmen had murdered Jesus and cut his head off with a chainsaw.
Shit!
And she still had his head in her house. And so what did she do? Well, she boiled his head down, and then she put it in a box, wrapped it in tinfoil, and then she wrapped that box in wrapping paper, put a bow on it, and then went next door to Mary's house and said, hey, can you hold my sex toys for me? Because she knew Mary would likely not look in the box if it was sex toys. And so Mary took the box, put it in her closet, and then of course, the smell began several months later, and she would discover Jesus's head. Carmen was convicted of murdering her boyfriend, and she was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Police were never able to locate the rest of Jesus. All they had was his head. But there's a running theory that Carmen may have used the rest of her boyfriend's body and ground it up and then baked him into her croquettes.
I'm saying!
Out to people like Mary and other people in her neighborhood. But that's just a theory.
My ass. That happened. Theory, my ass. I know that happened. That's nasty. I'm not eating no food of my neighbors. That's nasty.
On the evening of June 24th, 1986, a 10-year-old boy named Juan Pedro Martinez Gomez bounced around in his seat and smashed his toy cars together in the cab of his father's big red tractor-trailer truck. Juan was so excited he could barely sit still. He always wanted to go for a ride in his dad's big truck. His dad was a long-haul trucker, but his dad always said no. But Juan had just gotten his best report card ever, and so as a reward for doing so well in school, Juan's father had surprised Juan and Juan's mom with this particular trip. Their plan was to drive from their hometown in southeastern Spain all the way across the country to the northern coast. And then once they got there, Juan's dad would offload the cargo that he had driven there. Juan and his mom and dad would stick around and kind of make a vacation out of it, going to the beaches and checking out the beautiful pastures where all the cows would graze. I mean, Juan was super excited. Juan's dad pulled the truck into this big lot with all these other trucks around, and then Juan's dad turned around and began backing the truck up so it could be paired up with the cargo he'd be hauling to the north coast. It was this huge 25,000-liter tanker that was covered in all these stickers and warning labels. And, you know, Juan's father didn't know what this tanker was.
Bro, I've seen a video of, like, one of those trucks that carry, like, gallons and tons of gasoline to be poured in the gas stations. I've seen, like, I think somebody ran into one of those. Like, I seen a video, or like either somebody ran into it or it just exploded. But like when it exploded, bro, the explosion was so ridiculously big. Like, I can't even comprehend how big that explosion was. It makes me so nervous when I see those big ass trucks carrying tons and tons of gasoline.
All lanes of the highway and into the air. It happened on a raised part of the highway, and flames spread.
And I live in Atlanta, where people just speed all the time. It makes me so nervous. You got hella semi trucks, right, passing through Georgia, right, and even just moving around Georgia, and people speeding like a mother cluck. It's only a matter of time before somebody just runs right into that shit, and man,
actually contained, but he could tell, you know, whatever it was pretty dangerous and also very important. And so as Juan's dad is backing up skillfully to line up with this tanker, Juan is just sitting in the back seat, absolutely transfixed at how cool his dad is. I mean, this is like the most amazing thing Juan had ever seen. And so finally, Juan's dad successfully hitched the truck to the tanker. And so once they were all hooked up, Juan's father yelled out the window and said bye to the people he worked with. And then Juan's father put in Juan's favorite tape cassette into the stereo and turned the music up. And then he turned onto the road and began making his way toward the highway. Juan's dad would drive basically all night, and Juan and his mother would basically sleep all night. But they would wake up at about 5 a.m. when Juan's father pulled into the parking lot of a diner that was located just north of the city of Madrid, Spain. They were making great time, so Juan's father told his family they could take their time eating. When the family did finish their meals, they got up and began walking out towards the truck, and little Juan, he turned around and he waved to the waitresses, and they all waved back. And then the family climbed back into Juan's father's truck, and then before long, Juan was curled up in the back seat trying to fall asleep again as his father merged onto the highway and began heading towards this stretch of mountain road called the Somosierra Mountain Pass. About 40 minutes later, a man who was also driving in the Somosierra Mountain Pass was just driving along when suddenly a huge red tractor-trailer truck came barreling toward him from behind, shining their lights into his car. And so this man, he sees this truck approaching so quickly, and he tried to get out of the way, but there was nowhere to go. And the truck wasn't stopping, it was honking its horn, and the truck smashed into this guy, which sent his car careening off the road, but luckily it did not tumble all the way down the mountain. And so this guy's car comes to a stop on the side of the road, and the guy, he kind of comes to, and he feels himself, he's worried he's got a serious injury. He did find a little blood on his head, but overall he felt he was okay. And then he managed to get his door open, and he climbed out of his car, and he looked a little ways down the road, and there was the truck that had hit him. It was now on its side, and it was hissing steam, and it didn't look like anybody inside the truck was trying to get out. Now, even though this guy was pretty shaken up from the crash he'd just gotten into, he felt like he was definitely in better shape than whoever was in this truck, and so he decided he would just go up there and try to help them. But after only taking a few steps, this white van came blazing around the corner and came to a screeching stop on the road right next to where this guy was. And then before the guy could do anything, the sliding door to the van flung open, and this woman with blonde hair jumped out, and she ran over to him, and she said, "I'm a nurse, do you need any help?" And so this guy, he's looking at this woman, and he's kind of sizing her up, and she did not seem like a nurse. And in fact, for some reason, this guy felt like she just made him really uncomfortable. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. And then he looked past this woman at the van, and he saw the driver looked oddly similar to the woman, except it was a man who was driving, but he also had very bright blonde hair, and he had these striking blue eyes that really stood out even from a distance. And then in the passenger seat of this van was this elderly woman who was just staring daggers at this guy who's now talking to this nurse who's next to him. And so the guy's looking at the old woman, and the old woman's looking right back, and she really looked mean, like she was not happy to be talking to him. And so the guy finally just said to this woman who was claiming to be a nurse that, "You know what, I don't need any help, go help them. They need help because they haven't gotten out of the truck yet." The woman just nodded, and then she ran back to the van, hopped inside, and the van sped, the 100 feet down the road to where the crashed big red tractor-trailer truck was. And again, the woman hopped out, and she rushed over to the truck, and she climbed on top of it, and she reached down, and she took something out of the truck. But from his perspective, 100 feet back, the guy who had also crashed, he couldn't tell what she had taken out of the cab. But after she took whatever she took, she climbed off the cab. She did not attempt to help anybody inside of the truck. She jumped back in the white van, and the white van sped off down the road, and they were gone. The guy barely had time to process what had just happened before he began to smell this unbelievably powerful rotten egg smell. When help arrived, emergency responders immediately realized they had an environmental disaster on their hands. The big red tractor-trailer truck, which was Juan's father's truck, was hauling 25,000 liters of sulfuric acid, and that rotten egg smell they were smelling in the area meant the air was now becoming toxic as the sulfuric acid leaked out and began interacting with the ground and making its way into the nearby river. So before anybody could even go inside of this truck to see if there were survivors, they had to basically cover it and the surrounding areas with hundreds and hundreds of pounds of sand and lime to try to counteract the acid. It would take hours to do this, and in that time, nobody came out of the truck's cab. And then finally, when emergency crews were able to go up to the truck and look inside, they discovered that the vehicle's occupants were all dead. However, there were only two bodies. It was Juan's mother and father. Juan was nowhere to be found. Now, one of the theories was, when this crashed, maybe the sulfuric acid landed on Juan's body somehow and literally dissolved him, and so that's why he was not found. But that's not possible because it would take much, much longer for sulfuric acid to totally eat away someone's body. And the body would have to be fully submerged in the acid the entire time. So that could not have happened. Rescuers would search the entire area deep into the woods in all directions, looking for signs of this child, but there were none. And when investigators attempted to recreate this accident to try to figure out what actually caused it and why it happened, what they would learn would only confuse them more. Juan's father's truck had nothing wrong with it mechanically, meaning the brakes weren't messed up, the accelerator wasn't messed up. There really was no reason why this truck should have crashed unless it was intentional. That's the only way this could have happened. Also, the truck contains something called a tachometer, which registers every time the truck slows down or stops. And when investigators looked at the record from this tachometer, they discovered that Juan's father had slowed down or stopped 12 different times between leaving the diner and crashing. But the route from the diner to the crash site was a straight shot with no traffic lights or stop signs. Basically, there had been no reason from the diner to the crash site to ever slow down or stop. But again, Juan's father did 12 separate times. And then also there were traces of heroin that were found in a hidden compartment in Juan's father's truck. Now, Juan's parents had no criminal record and absolutely no connection to drugs or the cartel, but investigators did consider a theory that, perhaps a drug cartel ambushed Juan and his family, and ultimately Juan was kidnapped. But there was one more really strange element to Juan's disappearance, and that was that white van that guy saw right after the crash. Multiple people in the area around the Somosierra Mountain Pass said they saw that exact white van because they all remembered the woman and the man who had that same really bright blonde hair. It just was something that was kind of unique and stood out. But the police tried to track down this van and the man and the woman and the elderly woman who was also claimed to have been seen inside the van, but no trace of that van was ever found. And also, police were never able to figure out what that woman actually took from inside of Juan's father's cab before they sped off and disappeared. Missing person posters of Juan went up all over Spain, and almost immediately loads of sightings were reported of Juan. But every time the police followed up on these sightings, they never panned out. Interpol, which is a major international police organization, called Juan's disappearance one of the strangest disappearances in all of Europe. 1 year after the crash, so in 1987, a driving instructor in Madrid, Spain, was filling out some paperwork in his office when he heard a knock on the door. When he answered the door, he found there was this elderly woman who appeared to be blind, and with her was a young boy who appeared to be about 11 years old. The driving instructor asked them, how can I help you? And he watched as the elderly woman turned and whispered something into the little boy's ear. And the driving instructor, he could hear her whispering, but he couldn't understand what she was saying. It sounded like a foreign language. And in fact, it would turn out they figured out she was speaking Farsi, which is the language spoken in Iran. The little boy listened to the elderly woman, and then after hearing what she had to say, he turned to the driving instructor and he asked in perfect Spanish, "Where's the US Embassy?" The instructor gave them directions, and then the little boy nodded, and then he and the elderly woman, they turned around, they grabbed each other's hands, and they began walking away. And as they walked away, the driving instructor, he just couldn't help but feel like there was something oddly familiar about these two people. And so he flagged them down and he said, "Come back for a second." And so the boy and the woman, they came back, and the driving instructor, he asked the boy, he said, "Do you live in Spain? And if you do, how long have you lived here for?" And when he asked the boy this, the boy immediately looked really afraid and just didn't say anything and kind of just stepped back like this, like he wasn't going to answer. And then the elderly woman, she turned and she whispered something else into the boy's ear. And then after she was done talking, the boy kind of settled down and he looked at the driving instructor and he said, 6 months. And for some reason, at this exact moment, the driving instructor realized why this boy seemed so familiar. He remembered seeing him on all those missing person posters all over the place. And so the driving instructor, he couldn't remember the boy's name. And he goes, "Hold on a minute." He turns and he runs inside of his office and he finds one of the posters that said Juan Pedro Martinez Gomez. He grabbed it and he ran back out to show it to them and be like, "Hey, they're looking for you." But when the driving instructor came back to the front door, the boy and the blind old woman were gone. And so the driving instructor, he stepped out, he's looking around, he's yelling out for them. They were gone. Now, it's important to understand that to this day, no sightings of Juan have ever been confirmed, and that includes the driving instructor who claimed to have seen Juan. But to this day, Juan's body has never been found, he's still missing, and his case is still unsolved.
Shit. I need to start saving these pictures with the names on them because there's a lot of missing people, and there's also a lot of traffic that happens in Atlanta. So if I can do something about that, I would. But I don't know. It's just it's up in there. The first story with the old lady and the old guy, something not right. Mr. Ball did say they had some sort of I don't know if it was like a disease, but they forgot, I don't know if they often forgot what they were doing or something, but it's like, oh man, I don't know if it was a setup or if they just forgot something as they were driving. But Jesus, I just want to let y'all know, if your neighbor gives you a box without saying nothing, and it seems suspicious, it seems sus, it seems clucked up, it seems sus clucked, don't take it. That's nasty. I knew it. I mean, he did say it was speculation, but like, come on now, like putting two and two together, like his head was in a box, and the rest of his body was nowhere to be found. And she cooked croquettes all the time with meat. Come on now, Jesus. And okay, so the little boy that went missing, I think the people in the van, right towards the ending of the third story, I feel like the people in the van, because you had the old lady, you had the guy and the girl. I think the people in the van went to the truck and got the little boy, and for some reason, that little boy ended up with the old lady. That's my best guess. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. Keep it cool, keep it classy, and I love you. Stay happy, my family.